Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. There is a famous hadith that is commonly invoked by the Sufis or the mystics, which says, Mutu qabla an tamutu, which means die before you die. That is, experience death in this life before the actual death overpowers us and takes us away from this temporal life. The inevitability of death is uncontested. It is a reality that no one is contesting or questioning. It is going to happen to all of us at one point in history. The Quran says, Kullu nafsin dha'ikatul maut, every soul will taste death. The esoteric or the inner meaning of this particular hadith is that while we do have time on this earth, we should maximize this opportunity and try to overpower, try to annihilate and conquer our nafsul ammara, which is the soul that prompts us toward that which is evil. It incites us toward that which is negative and animalistic, and that which is carnal residing in our soul. So we are trying to experience death before the arrival of the actual death. One of the purposes and one of the merits of this month of spirituality, the month of Ramadan, is to purify ourselves, cleanse ourselves from the negative and animalistic tendencies that resides in us. In a way, we are trying to decenter the self or remove ourselves from the center, our ego, and replace in its place the divine or God. That is decentering the ego, the self, and recentering the divine or God. And ultimately, this should lead to returning back to our original nature in which we were created. As the Quran says, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا, turn your face toward that which is the religion of uprightness, the religion of justice and monotheism and equity and fairness. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا, that religion which is founded upon our fitra, our human primordial disposition, our human nature, the original nature in which God created us. And if we are able to do this, that means we have already experienced death in the mystical understanding of mutu qabla an tamutu, die before the actual death. In one of the university courses dealing with death and dying, one of the assignments that was given out for students to do was to write an obituary or write a eulogy about themselves. That is, how would they like to be remembered as upon their death? What is their vision of what their eulogy or their obituary should look like upon death? One of the students had a superstition that if he writes this eulogy about himself, then perchance death may come upon him earlier than its actual prescribed date. And therefore, he asked for a substitute assignment to avoid writing an obituary or a eulogy for himself. If one is able to efface one's ego, if one is able to annihilate one's ego, then there is no presence of two. There is no presence of duality, that is me and then our creator, but rather we become one, as such that all that we see is not ourselves, but all that we see is the divine and the divine beauty, because our ego, our self, has been effaced, has been erased, and has been annihilated. If we are able to accomplish this task of experiencing death before we die, then perhaps this Hadith al-Qudsi would apply to us. It says, God says, my servant continues to draw near to me until I love him. When I love him, I become his ear with which he hears, his eye with which he sees, his hand with which he grasps, and his foot with which he walks. In me he sees, in me he hears, in me he grasps, and in me he walks. If he comes to me walking, I will come to him running. If he draws near to me the span of one hand, I will draw near to him by a cubit. We become the instrument and the agent of God in accomplishing his mission on earth. Part of the exercise is, of course, to also ask for God's forgiveness and God's repentance, especially in this month of Ramadan, where the doors of divine mercy and forgiveness are wide open. And this is part and parcel of exercising that death, mutu qabla an tamutu. Also, to read the Qur'an, you will recall that there was a time in history, in Christianity, in Catholicism, where they had prohibited anyone from possessing the Bible or anyone reading the Bible. And if anybody was caught either possessing the Bible or reading the Bible, there would be very strict punishments and very heavy penalties upon the person. It was done by the religious institutions partly because they wanted to remain gatekeepers of knowledge. They wanted to maintain their power and authority over the populace. And one way of doing that was to prevent people from reading the Bible or possessing the Bible in their hand. Fortunately, with the printing press and the new technology, people do have access to the sacred scriptures. Likewise, we should not forget that we have been blessed with the Qur'an, and the responsibility is upon all of us to read the Qur'an and also to understand and apply the teachings of the Qur'an. I conclude by just emphasizing and reminding you how important is the reading of the Qur'an and reflecting upon the Qur'an. On the eve of Ashura, on the 9th of Muharram, Imam Hussein made a plea and requested from the enemy camp that he wanted to have an extension of one night so that he can once again read the book of God, read the Quran before he's taken away to the life of eternity. In his statement, he's reported to have said, فَهُوَ يَعْلَمُ أَنِّي أُحِبُّ الصَّلَاةَ لَهُ. For he knows, for God knows that I love to pray to him. وَتِلَاوَةَ كِتَابِي. I also love to read his book. That is to say that even if there is only 24 hours left in one's life, in the case of Imam Hussein, he still wanted to read that book one more time. And it underlines the importance that we should make every effort to read this book, to understand the book, and also to apply its teaching. And then the Imam says, وَكَثْرَةُ الدُّعَى. I also want to use these last moments to engage in supplications to God, to engage in a dialogue, a kind of a communication with God. Wal istighfar. And also he says, in these last moments of my life, I would like to engage in asking for forgiveness, asking for repentance. This is a remarkable statement. that even when we are in the last moments of our life, the Imam shows us the importance of reading the book, seeking forgiveness, prayers, and supplications. Finally, I conclude with this Quranic verse that talks to us in many ways, those of us who are self-absorbed and cannot see anything other than our own ego and our own ambitions and aspirations. It says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. Have you seen the one who regards as God, ilaha? Have you seen the one who regards as God his own desires, his own ambitions, his own aspirations, his own goals, his own selfishness? So in some ways, the Quran is saying that even people who are religious, so to speak, practicing religious people, they can fall into the trap of self-worship or egoism. And the Quran is reminding us in this month of Ramadan to use every opportunity to cleanse ourselves from the many spiritual diseases, the most fatal and the most dangerous of which is our self, our ego, our unrestrained desires, and our self-worship, which constitutes a kind of polytheism. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.